Hello, my name's Joanna Toch. This is the Family Law Cafe podcast. Family Law Cafe is an online family law service. We help you get the best outcome in your family law case. We have a big network, and my aim is to introduce you to some of our network, some really very amazing people. And today we have Jules Anderson. She has a business called Feeling Glorious, and it's all about optimum health, which is incredibly important when you're going through a separation, when you are dealing with divorce, finances, children matters. So I've asked her to come in and have a chat with me. So Jules, nice to meet you again.
Lovely to be here.
So tell me a little bit about you and how you got into what you're doing.
Well, I've always been interested in health and well-being. I'm trained back in the day, I do have a chemistry degree, and it was always the biochemistry that fascinated me and the actual, you could relate to it. It was about us, it was humans, it was the way we that sort of makes us work and makes us feel good. And I've always been interested in health and nutrition and eating and doing the kind of things, not just because of, oh, I want to avoid disease or I want to lose weight, but actually what can make me feel my best. So I was one of these geeks that always studied at weekends and went off and doing courses and read every book there was on everything. So it's kind of in my blood, and I've done it for years. So when I started my business, it was very much about how good health and good habits can make you feel and make you just allows you to have a better life. You know, everything is better when you feel better. Those days when you feel, when you're sick or you're not feeling good, it colours the way you view the world. So, I'm very much about how how good health makes you feel and how it enhances your life.
Okay, I don't think anyone could argue with that. I mean, it is the main thing, well, certainly to me, and I'm sure many people. How long have you been offering this kind of service?
Well, I've had the business for just over 12 years now. And so yes, I've been offering it. I offer it one to one. I've run group programs and I work with corporates as well. I tend to work mainly with sort of very high achieving professionals, and the stress that they're going through plays a very big part. The way I work is very holistic. It's not just about the nutrition, it's about your stress levels, it's about your hormones, your sleep, your gut health, all of these things, the environment you're in, the people you're around, the kind of challenges you're going through all play a part in your health. So just focusing on what you eat is just a tiny sliver of a picture, which is why the statistics say that over 95% of nutritional programs don't work in the long term, because and the reason being is it's a tiny slice of human life. Something that might work very well in a research project or in a lab, when you put it in real life with real people and messy situations and the curveballs that life throws you sometimes, you can't separate the two. So my work's very much about bringing all of those together and making sure that when you do get better, that you stay better and that you're empowered you've got the knowledge, you've got the tools, the ability for a start, it makes you feel more empowered in your own health. I meet a lot of people who feel very much victim to their circumstances, like, oh, it's my genetics or it's my age, or I can't escape this, I've got this, this health issue. And they feel very disempowered. So I'm all about actually giving people the tools and the knowledge to equip them, and the inspiration and the context that actually that doesn't have to be. Because I think some of the narratives we have in our culture are quite disempowering. So I'm all about helping people kind of reclaim their health and take ownership so that they stay better in the long term, and they're not part of this sort of up and down yo-yo pattern of, oh, I'm now healthy and no, I'm not. And that idea of this is good and this is bad, I'm being good, no, I'm being bad, which I hate.
That's massive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm being a bit naughty if I have
Yeah,
this.
and I
Yeah.
just think
Naughty to
that's,
who?
I
Yeah.
know, and it's so bad for us because actually, even biochemically, when you look at what goes on in your body, the minute you say, oh, I feel a bit guilty about eating this cake, your body is actually biochemically shutting down pathways which mean that that cake isn't going to be digested as well as it would if you were going, I'm going to really enjoy and savor this piece of cake because I deserve this treat. So it's a real balance, and I'm all about, you're not going to feel really good in your life if you're constantly depriving yourself of everything you love. And that's certainly not an excuse to go out and buy a box of Krispy Kremes every day, but it is an encouragement to don't see it as this sort of negative, another stick we have to beat ourselves up with, because we can be quite self-flagellating when it comes to our health, and that idea of, I'm being really bad, or that was a cheat day, that was a naughty day. Even the words around it are really bad. What's your good habit and your bad habit? And I really don't like the way that people are encouraged to see in that kind of black and white. It's a spectrum, and see it in colour, and those little things that, whatever the thing that is less healthy, the more you focus on trying to edit it out of your life, what you focus on grows. And if all you can think of is, I'm not allowed to eat chocolate anymore, all you will think about all day long is, I want to eat chocolate. I want to eat chocolate.
I want to eat chocolate.
Whereas if you make it okay to eat chocolate, and you can go, do you know what? I've got chocolate there, which I could have if I let myself. But you know what? I'm going to have it a bit later. And often I find clients will do that, and then they won't have it a bit later. They're fine.
Yeah, that moment's gone. I mean, I know when we met, as soon as I met you, I was just straight away saying, hey, what about people going through separation and divorce? And because that's such a tough time, and it can coincide with being a little bit older, where obviously, when you're young, you can do lots of things it doesn't show. What I mean is, you might be able to go out and drink lots, and then the next day you're up again and it's not really showing. Whereas as you get older, your body's sort of breaking down a bit. And I feel that these things coincide. So I asked you if that was something you'd ever thought about. And I know now that you've designed a course around this, so I want to have a bit of a chat about that, because I'm really excited about this. So when someone's going through a separation, what can you tell us about how their body might be reacting to that situation?
Well, this is what I come across all the time in clients. I do tend to work with a lot of clients who are going through, they've got high pressure environments. They're often going through problems with separation, problems with divorce, problems with family members. And what that's doing, the stress that's involved, and often trauma that's involved in the body. So people think of stress as being something that's quite a mental thing, and they think of stress as something that's going on up here. But stress affects every single part of your body. And one of the most important things that it'll do is it'll shut down it. When you're in a stressful situation, this is kind of evolutionary wisdom. If you think back to when we were, cavemen running away from tigers, our stress response is evolutionarily baked into us and designed to keep us alive. So it kicks in when, there's a tiger, it's running after us and we have to escape. So what the body does is it diverts every bit of energy into us being super alert. So we get super alert and switched on, and it diverts all the glucose into our muscles so we can run away. And so if you think of the body systems that get stimulated, what it also does is it shuts down all the body systems that it doesn't need in those instances, which are things like digestion, reproduction, which is why classically a lot of people who are very stressed find problems conceiving. It shuts down your reproductive system. It shuts down your digestion, because the last thing you want to do when you're running away from a tiger is stop and have a big meal. And all those kind of rest and digest parts of your body and the healing, any kind of healing, gets switched off. Sleep. It'll switch off all your pathways that encourage you to have relaxing sleep and rest, because your body's in hypervigilant mode. And what happens in situations which are kind of prolonged stress, which separation, divorce, any matters of family disputes, are prolonged periods of stress. You might not be running from a tiger, but the systems in your body, it's exactly the same. It's stimulating all those stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline rushes, that are stress responses, and that's going on and on and on for as long as you're in those in those stressful situations. And then if it's shutting off your digestion, then you're not getting the right nutrition, you're not being able to sleep properly, and all of those things have a huge effect on your actual physical health. So stress goes way, way beyond something that's just going on kind of up here and in your brain and in your mental health. It's affecting every part of your body. And then it becomes a vicious cycle, because it upsets your gut health, it upsets your sleep patterns, and if your sleep patterns are upset, that's going to, you naturally, when you're sleep deprived, you crave more carbohydrates, you want stimulants, you want caffeine, and all that's going to do is make sleep harder. It's going to make your metabolism worse. Sugar in your system is going to make your gut health worse, and it becomes this kind of spiral downwards that, and people going through a lot of stressful situations, classically there's so much they're having to deal with. The one thing they tend to neglect is their own personal health, and then it's bad habits start to creep in because they're exhausted, because they're overstretched, because they're sleep deprived. They're then much more likely to make bad food choices. And I know I'm not a big fan of the sort of good habits, bad habits, but in those situations you do tend to gravitate towards stimulants and sugar and carbs and things that, when you're having, to have now and again as a treat, are absolutely fine, but to become the kind of lifestyle that's supporting you through a stressful period when it's prolonged is just going to be a kind of downhill slope, that you end up coming out of something like a divorce process. You're pretty exhausted anyway. It's a long, prolonged process. What you don't want to do is come out absolutely physically and emotionally spent as well. So what I always try to do with clients often who come to me because they're part way down that journey, they've come to me by the time their health is already suffering, because they've been through these kind of processes. So they're coming to me when they're hitting quite a low point. What I really like to encourage people to do is to recognize when they're going through a stressful situation. Start to look after your health sooner rather than later. Recognize that you're feeling under stress. Recognize that you're not feeling quite yourself. And the earlier that you can start to take some action, the less likely you are to be at that point where you come out the other end of a divorce absolutely depleted. And there was a recent report published saying, I mean, with quite stark statistics about the amount of time people have to take off work. As many as 1 in 8 people leave their jobs at the end of a divorce because they're so exhausted, and they either haven't got the energy, or they've got to a point where they just can't sustain that work environment anymore. And you don't, bad enough to have to deal with going through a divorce, you don't want to have to deal with the knock-on effects of, oh, now I'm going to have to leave my job, or I've taken so much sick time that my work is starting to challenge my ability to do my job. So you want to get to start taking care of yourself and your health before it gets to that point.
Yeah.
So it's really great to hear, when you're talking about how you work with clients, that you're encouraging them to look after themselves through that process.
Well,
in all senses.
Yeah, because there's the other thing is that people might think, I'll just get through this first, then I'll look after my health.
Yeah.
And of course, they're having to make really big decisions, and they can, because they're feeling so bad, be then blaming the other party, think, oh, he's made me feel. It's sort of just, as you say, a vicious cycle, isn't it? And so then when they're making those decisions, they're struggling anyway. And let's imagine it's husband and wife, and there might be a big life change where the court might be saying, well, you can go out to work now. Maybe it's a woman who hasn't been working or working part, oh, you can go to work now. So all of these things happening at the same time. So it seems to me a really good time to really try to take stock and work on your health if you can possibly do it.
Do you know, it's really important, especially in situations where you're having to make really big life decisions. Because when you're not feeling your best, you don't, again, we talked earlier about it sort of colouring your view on the world, but actually also when you're under a lot of stress, all those things physically going on in your body, they affect your mental acuity, your decision-making capabilities and capacity. So you're more likely to make bad decisions, or you're more likely to get overruled by your emotions, because in our brain, our survival instinct and that part of the brain that will have an emotional survival response, which is never the best. You know, it's what I often refer to as the toddler response, which is, you know, when you're tired and you're sleep deprived, your toddler will have a tantrum. We're no different as adults. That's just, again, biochemistry. And if you're in a dispute with a partner, you're more likely to have a very emotional, instinctive response, which might not always be the best for you in the long term. And it might also perpetuate the problem and make the process of reaching a resolution go on for longer, which doesn't serve anybody either. So, you know, in all senses of it, thinking of health in that sort of fully rounded way of, you know, it does affect your decision making. So, you know, you want to be clear and you want to make the decisions that are going to be the best for your future, and don't get so exhausted and so, you know, depleted in your health that you then make those bad decisions that come back. And, you know, when you're feeling better, when you've decided to look after your health once you've got through it, you might look back and go, well, hang on a minute, that took a lot longer and I made silly decisions because, you know, I let my emotions override me because I wasn't feeling my best.
I do think it's a complexity of family law, and sometimes then you're put into then quite a brutal court arena with its set rules and times and things that have to be done. And sometimes people will say, I know they're really struggling and I have to just push them a little bit. And we do have to get this document in, and it's a real struggle and something probably they could manage really easily at any other time. And then let's then just throw in the fact that you have children who are being affected. So, you know, if you're healthy and well, you're showing them your best self. Yeah, I just wonder how anyone does it. And I just think that, you know, the fact that you've got your children struggling means you really have a duty to really try and look after your own health during this period.
It's really important with, you know, having worked with a lot of clients and having been through challenges myself as well. You know, I can fully empathize with clients who are coming with that, you know, because I have had some challenges from, you know, a family point of view, and you know, I have a son, and it's really important to be at your best, to be the best for them. And again, the feeling that I see it with clients, the guilt that they then have on top of all the things they're dealing with, then they're feeling bad because of the issues that they're seeing in their children, and they're concerned because they want to do the best for their kids. And again, when you're depleted and you're tired and emotional, you know, it's very difficult to be able to support your kids through it too.
I had a when I was going through my own divorce, here's a little trick. I don't know if it would be just something I thought of. I just gave myself a new name to look after the children. Oh, here's so-and-so. I'm like, oh, we really like her. Yeah, she was like this really fun person. So I just called myself a different name and just stepped into that role. It seemed to work quite well. I thought she was quite vaguely ridiculous character, but they said, oh, we like her. So, yeah, just a little tip. I'm really interested to get to some detail of what that you think that you can offer, because you're so incredibly knowledgeable, and I know that we're just not going to be able to get all of that information out. We just probably talk for 24 hours. But what are the things that you think that you could do with people going through this period? And it's usually about 6 months at least, isn't it? They're going through their divorce and separation. what could you add to help them? Because it's such a confusing area, isn't it? Shall I eat this, not eat this, have alcohol, not have just a little bit? It's so confusing for everybody.
I find with a lot of people that's exactly the problem that they have, which again is so disempowering. There's so much information out there that we're sort of awash in it. And there's this feeling of, well, again, good, bad, black, white, naughty, not naughty, allowed, not allowed, coloured red, green and amber lights on every food piece of packaging. And it's exhausting for people. So the way I work with people is very individual, and it's over time. So I'm not going to give someone a kind of here's what you need and here's a 30-day program, because those kind of things don't work. You need to embed something longer term so it becomes just part of who you are and part of the way of life that you are. But it's also very important to be very individualized about how your own body responds, because everybody's body responds differently. And even one person's body might respond differently when they're going through a divorce than they would a year before, a year after, when everything's going fine. So I bring in, I combine use of sort of judicious use of technology. I don't think we should just always use it to monitor, because that can get very distracting. Where we can use technology in a way that helps us take action that's going to be the right action. Because a lot of people, when they take on these programs, they just do it because, well, that worked and there's a book and it worked for my best friend or my mum or the person I saw on telly. Doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So where I'll bring in some of the technology, and there's some great technology out there, things like continuous glucose monitoring, to help you see what's your reaction to different foods.
So is that when you slap on something on your arm and
Yes.
It's constantly telling you how the sugar's coming through you? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you do what I would tend to do it with people. If you're a diabetic, you have to have one all the time. But what I would do with people,
So this
is
is used by diabetics, isn't it?
Yes.
To give them that information about their insulin levels. Okay. Yeah.
A type 1 diabetic needs to use that. It's very important that they monitor their blood sugar all the time. They understand what's going on in their body. So a type 1 diabetic has to pay particular attention to it, because it's quite critical. But for the average person, to actually do it for a couple of weeks, just so that you get a feel for how different foods affect your blood sugar. And then actually what I will always do with people is to do it alongside keeping a diary of how you actually feel. And it's remarkable how people can look and they'll go, oh, do you know those days where I skipped breakfast? Look what happened to my blood sugar chart. And how did I actually feel? Was I headachy? Was I hungry? Some people can miss breakfast and they're fine till lunchtime. Other people would, for me, I can't do that. I would be hallucinating by midday if I hadn't had some breakfast. So everyone's response is very different. And by doing that for a couple of weeks, noticing what happens, you can then take action that makes the right result for you. So what's great is you're not wasting your time on a lot of interventions that might work for your best friend or your mum, but they don't necessarily work for you. So it helps in a way shortcut. You understand your body, you start to really feel into what's going on, and you can see it on the chart. So it satisfies both our instinct and our logical minds, where it's like, yeah, I can see that in the data. And I also use technology that measures something called heart rate variability.
So just before we go on to that, so when they've done that, then you would discuss that through with them, and then maybe have a different eating plan or different timing, different types of food, and just what works for them.
So we work really closely together. Mm-hmm. Firstly, to test different. There's some various exercises that I'll go through with people to test different foods, different combinations of foods. Different kind of ratios, what you have at and different times of day to see what effect
So
it has.
detailed. This is amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for the sake of doing that for a couple of weeks, and then we'll discuss this in depth. So I see everyone's charts. You can, the individual will get it on an app. So you can download the app on your phone and you see these great little charts every day in real time. So you can see if you've had that piece of toast for breakfast, how it affects your blood sugar, or if you've just had a coffee and a croissant. What do the charts, the spikes look like? And then we work really closely together to look at those. I'll get copies of those charts, and then we'll look at actually, so what happened when you changed your breakfast, or what happened when you tried having, a different balance of, you didn't just have a vegetable salad, you actually had a piece of chicken with it. What difference did that make to your blood sugar? And how did you actually feel in the afternoon? So it means a little bit of taking detail, but then when we look at it together, what it does with clients is it just makes them feel so much more self-assured in understanding their own body, that it's something they can take forward into their life from then on. And what I aspire is for clients to be able to leave a program with me and not need me anymore. Yes, they absolutely can come back and have top-ups and have, because our bodies evolve and our lives evolve over time, but to not need to have another chunky program. They understand themselves enough that when they're coming back to me, it's about, actually, I'm in a new place now, I'm looking for the next level.
So they take control.
Where do we go now? And it's very much about taking ownership and taking control of your own health, because it just makes people feel.
Because it could be said that while you're going through a divorce, do you need anything else? Is it going to be too much? But then I also wonder, if you are focusing then on your health and then you see the benefits and you're with someone to discuss it through, then you start getting more confident and it just makes everything seem easier. And then you're not just focusing on, oh, what's now come? What does the latest letter say? I don't know what you think about that.
And I will always work with people at a pace that suits them.
Yeah.
So if people are absolutely, because again, I work with a lot of people over lockdown, for instance, when they were dealing with relationship issues because they were all in the house together. They had all the kids at home, they had loads of work to do, so they were really overwhelmed. And a lot of that time they had to go really, really slowly in terms of making change. So it's very much about meeting someone where they're at and giving something that they can. It's far better to do something tiny that you can keep on doing all the time, because it does make you start to feel like, at least, I'm doing something and that's helping. And I see the difference, and that motivates you to do a bit more. And that's a motivation that comes from inside, rather than the most programs and things where people will read a magazine article, or they'll do a program, or they'll see something on television. It's like someone's telling me
Created
to
by
do
someone
something,
else. Yeah.
and when your plate is already full with all the challenges that people are going through when they're dealing with family issues and divorces, as well as keeping the children happy, holding down a job, all the things that they still have to, all those plates they still have to keep spinning. You've just got to be, I'm always very mindful about giving people what they can cope with, because if you give them something that they can cope with, each week they can cope with a little bit more. Whereas if you give them something that's too much, they'll just fall over, and then they'll think it hasn't worked, and then they'll blame
We've all been
themselves.
there.
Yeah.
And then you do heart rate variability.
Yes,
Tell me.
yes. So it's a sort of more complex piece of technology, but what it does do is a sort of, as an overview, it will measure your levels of stress and recovery, because we all need a little bit of stress in our day, because stress is what, we need this, where our bodies are in, it's called sympathetic nervous system mode, which is it's action mode. So we are in action for part of the day. but we need to spend the majority of our day in more of a kind of rest and digest and calming mode. So what these sensors will do is help us understand how our body, where our body is triggered. And again, it's very personal. So you get your own chart. Again, you only wear this for, say, 5 days at a time. You can log what you're doing in a day. You can see your stress levels showing up as kind of red bars, your rest and digest as green. And then you can look at how the patterns of your day affect your stress and affect your health, and then also the knock-on effect it has on your sleep. Because you can actually, and I've seen this umpteen times, you can have clients that might be sleeping for 7 or 8 hours a night.
But are they getting any rest?
But the bar, it's showing up as all red bars, which means that they're not getting any of the replenishment of their sleep. So they might think they're in bed sleeping, but the body processes that are replenishing your body aren't happening. So all that kind of rest and the repair and that has to go on when you're asleep, and resting your nervous system, if that's not happening, then it's going to show up. So what it's really great at is, again, you can be really clear about the things that affect your own body and the things that are good and bad. So if you've powered through lunch because you think, I've got to get on with my afternoon, I'll just power through this, and then you see the knock-on effect on your sleep, or on how productive you are in the afternoon, or how stressed you are in the afternoon, then you can see it, and then you can perhaps just try one day and go, okay, I'm just going to take half an hour at lunch, go away from my desk, go for a quick walk, and then look at what the knock-on effect is in the afternoon. And it's what I found with people is we all know what we should do. Everybody knows, oh, I should eat more fruit and vegetables. Oh, I should sleep more. I should rest more. I should and shouldn't. But it doesn't always mean that people do it. There's something very compelling about seeing on a chart the days that I work through lunch. Actually, my afternoons, I'm not as productive, and then my sleep suffers and my overall health score goes way down. And to see that on a chart is a real wake-up call for people. And it's very interesting because they then go, oh, do you know what, I'll see if I go for a walk in the morning. Let me see how that... And they start to experiment with it because they can see it so clearly on a chart. So what it does is it's a really good thing that just... They're not learning anything they don't already know, but what it really does is it encourages people to take action. They see really clearly the response that action has, and they're much more likely to keep it up. And I've got people who have, I've been working with for years, and they go, I still do that thing that you taught me about 10 years ago.
So I know there's so much more I want to talk to you about, and I love the fact that people are learning for themselves and getting it's evidence-based, and then they're making their own decisions. Again, that's very much how we work at Family Law Cafe. I'm trying to explain where you do have lots of options. This is one of them. This is how it may work. So in some small way, we're kind of trying to do it in that way. Everything is highly individualized. So I'm going to leave you now, finishing. In our next podcast, we have the lovely Louis, who is a financial genius. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that. He can describe himself for himself. He's a young man I met in our network, gives financial advice. So I'm going to introduce him to you, or he's going to come in and he's going to ask you a few questions. So he's having listened to you because I like to connect our network. So please do stay there, and Louis will come and have a chat with you.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to meet you again.
You too.
And see you soon.
Hey Jules, how are you?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So I think Joanna sort of gave a little bit of information about me. My name is Louis. My surname's Ewart. I represent our family firm. I'm a third generation financial advisor. So I met Joanna networking, and she invited me to come along to a podcast. But yeah, I've heard a bit about you, and I heard a bit about your sort of podcast just there. I have a few questions, I suppose. if that's all right to run it by you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, I myself, I suppose, try and get the balance of sleep correct, and notice when it does go off balance. So, what are your tips for trying to get the right number of hours that you personally need?
Um, for me, most people kind of know and they gauge how many hours. Most people need between 7 and 9 hours. The younger you are, you can get away with less. Um, for the best way to get the best sleep is, I always say, is be as regular as possible with the times you wake up and the times you go to bed. And that can be something that challenges people. But when you think about, I always say to people, when you think about jet lag, or you think about when the clocks have gone back or forward, everyone feels a little bit off for a few days, and we're often essentially doing that every weekend when people have a lie-in at the weekend and don't in the day, don't during the week. So trying to get up and go to bed at exactly the same time each day makes a massive difference. It's sort of it's almost like it's like a muscle memory, like when you're in the gym and you're building up your muscles, and each time you go it gets stronger and stronger. The more you do, the more you wake and go to bed at the same time, you're strengthening your body into kind of recognizing that it's time to go to bed, and you'll get to sleep quicker. In terms of understanding what's best for you, there is quite a lot of technology that you can use to kind of measure your sleep. I don't think it's always necessary. It's quite interesting to do from time to time to see whether you're getting, because what you need is the really deep restorative sleep is the bit that for me is the most important. But for that, making sure that you're not having too many. If you can do the regular, that's the number one tip. But also not going to bed the closer you can go to bed, the more you can go to bed before midnight, ideally 10:30. But I recognise for most people's lives that's not it's not particularly feasible if you have a normal life. However, the more you can go to bed before 12, the more your body is, because there's times of the day when we naturally will sink into that deeper sleep. You need to give yourself time to go through the different phases of light sleep into the very deep sleep, and the deep sleep is where you're getting all the kind of restoration going on in your body.
Right.
So,
well, that's some serious information to take home. Thanks for imparting that knowledge. My other question, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Try and keep it to two, I suppose, rather than three. But it's around someone who's got a sweet tooth. So I do like my jams, not marmalade, but I'll have my jams, and I find that's quite a natural sugar to have. Can you suggest like other sort of natural sugars that are readily available, to sort of deal with like maybe an urge to have pints after work or something like that, because after 2 or 3 pints, the sugar sort of kicks in and you want to have more. So any sort of suggestions around that? Yeah.
You're right. With sugar, the more you have, the more you want. I mean, it's very, very addictive. So the more, it's very difficult to kind of shut that off with sugar, whether it's with drink or with food. What I would always say is, wherever you're having something sweet, try and balance it with, if you can balance it with some protein and some fat, you're less likely to have the reason you get the cravings is because you're getting a big burst of sugar into your bloodstream, and then it crashes down really quickly, which makes your body really crave more to bring it back up into balance. So the more, when you're having something sweet, you have something that is going to sort of balance that, take the edge off it. So whilst I'm not someone that would necessarily promote having a lot of jam, but for instance, if you have peanut butter and jam, you're going to add that little bit of balance, because having the protein in your body is going to mitigate some of the peaks and troughs of the sugar. So the more you can balance with protein, I say it for people even who might want a piece of toast in the morning. If you have a piece of plain toast, you're much more likely to have a big spike. Whereas if you have a toast with something like some avocado on it, which is fats, or to have it with some, slices of you know, chicken or, you know, slices of meat or an egg, that protein and the fat will balance out the sugar. So wherever you can, if you're having something that's got high sugar content, try and balance it with other things.